All right, for you guys who have never heard of Dry Bones Restoration Company, that is me. That's why it says Dry Bones Restoration Company Presents. This is our ministry name, based on Ezekiel 37. This is from a seminar that I give, which is the Biblical Research Techniques Seminar. Biblical Research Techniques is trying to give people a methodology in study. Most of us don't realize that we don't have a methodology in study. In fact, lots of people go through this seminar and they basically tell me at the beginning that they don't need it, which is the first sign that I know that they do, but we don't share that information. And so anyway, when they go through it, they go, wow, in the first session you gave me something I'd never heard of before. And yeah, be prepared, more's coming. But now, the thing is that this is not taught in schools. And that's why it's new. It seems to be new information. Now, maybe it's also just the way I'm saying it. Who knows? But I have found people, in fact, one of the very first seminars I gave, the president of a seminary was in the audience, and he came up to me and says, they didn't teach us this in seminary. And that is kind of why we run without methods. Now, I'm not saying seminaries don't teach techniques, that many of them do. Many of them do not. It depends on the level of teaching, which we were talking about earlier. If they're teaching on a conscious level where they reinterpret all technical information to support what they already know, that is not teaching on a technical level. And so those seminaries have a tendency to just reinforce our present beliefs. Well, this is just one of the sessions out of it. And what this is trying to do is help us gain the ability to be translators. Now, this isn't teaching translation. Don't get me wrong with this. And there are many good schools out there that teach translation. I am not trying to knock them with any of the statements I'm saying. This is for the general person in the congregation. And it helps us to identify with the translators, because often we just can't see why those translators would do such a stupid thing as to translate it this way, you know. And that's normally just our own arrogance. And so it's good to be able to have an understanding of what's going on, what they're having to deal with, why they sometimes can't translate it in the manner in which you think it's obvious that it should be. So anyway, we're going to start out with this. I've got a general statement. The title of it is Words Are Buckets in Which We Keep Ideas. Now, what we're trying to do, the purpose of communication, is for me to have an idea in my head. Me be able to use symbols, which are words either spoken or written, or gestures, or anything to communicate to the next person the same idea we have in our head, into their head. That's what communication is. It's to convey information. All right, well, we use words. And in using words, you will find out that it is not required that they understand exactly what you mean just because you use words. Not only do you have to choose your words carefully, but sometimes, even after carefully choosing words, we have a disagreement on what is meant. I gave an example earlier that I'll give again, just because the rest of the group is here. My dad used to say language is, and I'm not going to quote him exact on this. One of these days I'm going to sit down and get it written down exactly what he said, and then I'll be able to quote it. But he used to say something to the effect that language is not a perfect means through which we can communicate with each other, but it's the best we have. And you'll understand why, I think, in a few minutes that we get confused. He gave this example. He would say the sentence, David danced before the ark. there were three people there discussing what was meant. David danced before the ark. And one of them says, well, this means that David danced right there in front of the ark. And another one says, oh, no, no. No, it means that David danced before there ever was an ark. And then the next one says, oh, guys, you're both wrong. No, this means that David danced and then the ark danced. Okay, this is what ambiguity is. Even though the two seemed silly, I will guarantee you that if we took that verse and put it into the Messianic movement, we could have 3 different congregations over that verse. Just to let you know, it doesn't really exist. The verse isn't there, so that's why we haven't had to deal with it. But you see, we have a lot of ideas that are associated in a word. So what we want to do is we want to start out with one word and look at it and try to get the concept of what I'm talking about. So I put a bucket down there for the cat, and then I put a bucket down there for the trash. And so we're going to take this word cat and see if it associates with, if it goes in that bucket. So our first word is lion. Okay, now, does lion belong in the cat bucket or does it belong in the trash? Do we ever describe it as a cat? Okay, yeah, let's put it over there in the cat bucket. Then let's look at the second one. Cougar. Cougar, does that belong in the cat bucket or does it belong in the trash? All right, so we'll put it over there in the cat bucket. All right, next, fox. Does that belong in the cat bucket or does it belong in the trash? Trash. Everybody's agreed on this. This is pretty easy then. Okay, we'll put it over there in the trash bucket. What about a puma? Cat. Okay, we'll put that over in the cat bucket. You all are catching on to this pretty good. Coyote. Trash. Okay, yeah, we'll get over there in the trash bucket. Tiger. Okay, we'll put that in the cat bucket. Meerkat. There's some hesitation here. Okay. A meerkat is actually a mongoose. Okay? Now it does have the word cat in it though. But if you'll notice, it's not C-A-T, it's K-A-T.
See, I was looking for that.
Yeah.
I was looking for the trick.
Yeah, so I'll have to tell you, when my son Jeremiah was 3 years old, I love child stories. It makes it easy to convey some stories. He was sitting there one night and he was praying. He says, "Dear God, thank you for the cat." And we were thinking, oh, that's so cute. He says, "Dear God, thank you for the dog." Oh, that's so cute. Well, we've been watching this documentary on mongooses. And so he says, "Dear Lord, thank you for the meerkats." And Mary and I just about cracked up then, but we were keeping our straight face until he said, "Dear God, thank you for the mere dogs." Now see, in his mind, the cat belonged in the cat bucket because of the fact that it was cat and meerkat. Do you understand what's going on there? But for those of us who know that a meerkat is a mongoose, then it doesn't belong. It belongs over there in the trash. Okay. Jaguar. Cat, I think it belongs in the car bucket myself, but we'll put it over there in the cat bucket. Skunk. Skunk. They're called a polecat. Did you all ever watch the cartoons with Pepe Le Pew back in, and you know, okay, you still think it belongs in the trash? Okay, yeah, it belongs in the trash. But I will have to admit, there is a secondary association because of the polecat connection and the fact that it looks very closely to a cat, that cartoon was a joke that went for many, many years. You understand? That was an association that was kind of behind the scenes. It was a secondary association. So in some ways, we could almost put it in the cat bucket. It is at least close enough we can make jokes out of it. I'll give you a few jokes later where we assign things in that manner. So we have lion, cougar, puma, tiger, jaguar. They're all in the cat bucket. And then over here, fox, coyote, meerkat, and skunk get in the other bucket. Let me give you a joke. Okay. Now this wasn't a joke. This was written on a billboard in Lexington, Kentucky. It was for a realty company. It said, such and such a realty, I don't even remember the name of the realty, says, we sell Lexington by the yard. Okay, you see there's a nice pun there.
Yes.
Okay, the pun is there because we have an association between the thing around our house, the garden around our house, so to speak, and the yardstick. And the yardstick is used to sell material. Therefore, when they say they sell Lexington by the yard, and believe me, the prices they get for yards in Lexington, they might as well sell it by the yard, to get it down in the tens of thousands rather than in the millions. But anyway, you can use that joke because of the association that is made between yardstick and yard. But did you know that yardstick and yard have two different entries in the dictionary? They are not the same word at all. They have completely different histories. It's just at this present time, they have the same spelling and the same pronunciation, but they came from two different sources. So because of that, in English, we have an association, which is secondary. It's not a primary association where they were brought in together. This is why you will find that sometimes in the dictionary that there will be two different words that are spelled the same way, yard and yard, and another time there'll be 14 different definitions. Because the 14 different definitions for the same word all means that they came through the same source. Whereas two different words, even with the same spelling, means they come from completely different sources. So yard, incidentally, when it's speaking of a measurement, actually comes from the word that meant cane many years ago. And it turns out that if you got a cane that fit a person, it would be about 3 feet high, 3 of his feet high, not 3 12-inch sections. And so that was an association that's made. Now, on the other word, the word yard, which I mentioned, I actually clarified it with the word it comes from, because it actually meant garden. And the idea was this is our garden around the house. That's why they would beautify it. It would be, and it could even be planted for food. But that was it. You had the house and you had the garden close around. And so that while they are two different words, historically, they came together with the same pronunciation. For instance, in French, the word for yard is in the one around your house would be connected to jardin, which we pronounce as garden in English, but if you look at it, it's actually J-A-R-D, put the German pronunciation onto the J, which is ja, you would have yarden. So that's what's going on. They are related. Okay. Now, we're going to look at this in a little bit deeper manner. We're going to review it two-dimensionally because we're going to have the meaning of the word in one language may not match the definition of a comparable word in another language. This is something that we must grasp, because if we don't understand this, there is no way we can deal with the Bible. The Bible is not written in English, and we're wondering why in the world so many translations? This is why, right here. So we're going to look at this for a few minutes, and we're going to have to deal with the consequences. So we're going to now have the word cattle in English. And this is connected to the bucket here on the right, which is the word behemoth. Now, behemoth is typically translated as cattle in the Bible. So that's why I've got the cattle on one side and behemoth on the other, because that's its normal translation. And then I have the trash in the middle. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to discuss terms in English to see how they will relate. And you all are going to have to start looking at these saying, well, I think so, I don't think so, because you really don't know whether they go in the Hebrew bucket yet or not, for the most part, unless you speak Hebrew. Okay, so we have the word cows. Now, incidentally, I know that there's not such a word, so to speak. Huh? At the moment, we have cows. Now, the question is, does that belong in the cattle bucket?
Yes.
Yeah, cows, to us, it's a cognate. In fact, actually, cattle is the plural of cow. You don't have, so yeah, we'll put it in there. But does it belong in the behemoth bucket? Surely it would. That seems to be the concept they're getting across, isn't it? So, right, it does belong in the cattle bucket and in the behemoth bucket. So we can throw it in there. All right, now we get the word sheep. Sheep is the one we'll look at. Does that belong in the cattle bucket? No? Okay, no? We're all agreed on that? All right, does it belong in the behemoth bucket? No. Okay, yeah, sure? You say so?
No, I can still go with that.
Okay, you're just going to go for it and say, surely that's the point he's getting at here, huh? Okay, this is the problem, because sheep belongs in the behemoth bucket. Now, you see, when it mentions cattle in the Bible, nobody is seeing sheep in your mind, are you?
No.
Okay, that's the whole point, is that I'm trying to convey to you in my head, I need to convey to you the image that I have in my head to your head, and we're switching through languages now, and it's not being conveyed. So what happens if you add in sheep every time you see cattle in Scripture? It's going to change your entire meaning of the text, or at least it's going to. This doesn't add to salvation, don't get me wrong, but it gives us an idea of something that is not being conveyed. Now, here's the problem with this. We'll go on with this, but here's the problem. There's a whole lot that isn't being conveyed because of the transfer of the languages. You've heard it. It gains something in the translation, or it loses something in the translation. Both are true. All right, next word, oxen. Oxen, does that belong in the cattle bucket? Yeah, okay. Well, does it belong in the behemoth bucket? You are correct. It belongs in both. Right, behemoth is actually, it's actually behemoth, and that is the greatest of all cattle, which is the behemoth, the behemoth. Okay, goats. Does it belong in the cattle bucket? Okay, does it belong in the behemoth bucket? Why do you say that? Okay, you see what, yeah, he's picking up the idea that herd animals maybe could be the reason, the idea of behemoth. Okay, well, you're correct. It goes in the behemoth bucket. Now, incidentally,
Question.
okay, go. Question.
Why that and not the, that was the goat that you put in there?
Yes.
There was another one that you put in the trash. Which one was that?
I don't think I put anything in the trash yet.
Okay.
I think they've all either been in the behemoth bucket or both buckets. Okay. We'll get something to the trash here before long. Camels. Camels. Okay. Okay, trash, and he's got trash. Okay, now explain why you're saying trash. Okay. Okay, unclean animal. This is the first unclean animal I've thrown up there. Okay, so that's a good point. Okay, but it's used for their good, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Do you have to run from a camel when you see one, typically? Okay, yeah, it will kind of spit at you. Okay. Here's another thing to add to the understanding of what's going on. This is considered behemoth. Okay, and the reason it's considered behemoth is because it's generally directed by man. You know, it's domesticated. It does run in herds, by the way, just not, it doesn't run out in the world by herds. It's only in well, I don't know, maybe there's wild camels. I'm not familiar with wild camels or non-wild camels, but anyway, camels are included. So we'll put it over there in the behemoth bucket. Okay, now a question. Buffalo. Okay, we'll put it in the cattle bucket in English. Now, behemoth bucket. Now, why are you saying cattle only? Because this is a good question. Say that again. Ah, did you get what he said?
It's an American flag.
Okay, now we have to think context. I'm going to tell you that they did have buffalo over there. But you are correct. They didn't have buffalo over there. Okay, now let's see why I said what I said. There's something called a water buffalo.
Yes.
And the water buffalo is the bulldozer almost of Africa and the Middle East. Yeah, these are the oxen, the ones that work very hard. Okay, they work for men. They're tame. Yeah, this belongs in the behemoth bucket. However, you were referring to the American bison. Now, the American bison is a wild beast, and I don't mean barely wild. Out in Yellowstone a few years ago, there was a fella who wanted to take pictures of a bison laying in the field. He goes out, gets about 10 feet away from it, sets up his camera, gets it all focused, gets the shutter all ready to go. He's ready to take the picture, right? And he looks at it and he says, "Stand up! Stand up!" And of course, the buffalo doesn't know English and didn't really care. And so it just sat there and chewed its cud, or laid there and chewed its cud like it usually does. So cameraman gets a great idea. He goes around and he kicks the buffalo. He did not live 1 second past kicking the buffalo. The buffalo stood up and trampled him and walked off. Now, there is no reason to kill a buffalo for the stupidity of the person around it, as far as I'm concerned. But they had to start telling people in Yellowstone, don't mess with the buffalo. They will kill you. Because everybody thought that they were cattle. They were just normal cattle. No, they're not. They are wild beasts. And you actually cannot tame a buffalo. Even the people who raise them for meat, they know that you keep them corralled. They get a little bit more used to you and all that stuff. But you can be trampled still by the buffalo. Yes. Have I ever watched Man on the Buffalo? Is that a movie?
It's a YouTube series about Man on Buffalo.
Okay. Well, no, I haven't watched them. I'm kind of sheltered. So buffalo is one of those words that you really can't decide what to do with it because it doesn't work. We'll go ahead and put it in both because as far as it being an Asian buffalo, correct. Western buffalo, no. What's that?
Why does it go to the trash?
Well, it does. A bison would go to the trash. And if I put bison down instead of buffalo, which would be a distinction, then we'd throw it in the trash. So
Why is it trash?
the trash is there because sooner or later we're going to get something that's going to come up that doesn't go in either bucket, okay? Now, gazelle, have we made it? That is the question. A gazelle, does it go, see, the gazelle, it's maybe a flock animal, but it's not something that we heard too much, is it? Okay. So does the gazelle go in the cattle bucket? No. Okay. Got that settled. Does it go in the behemoth bucket? No, no. Okay. Well, guess what? The gazelle goes in the behemoth bucket.
Oh, snap.
Now, at this point, I'm going to share with you a distinction that's made in Hebrew that we don't ever notice. There is the term behemoth, which is sometimes translated as animals, but it's normally translated as cattle. But there's another term, which is chaya. And chaya, if you'll notice, it's even the word that's used for resurrection at times. It's the word for life. Kai is the original root form. And so it's used for life, and it means the lively beast. Okay, it really comes almost to the point of what point on the food chain it is. If you are under it on the food chain and it's likely to eat you, then it's the wild beast. And if it's the ones that you would likely eat and they aren't coming and attacking you, then usually they're lower on the food chain and they are the behemoth. So the gazelle fits in the behemoth bucket because it's still not the one that's out hunting you. Now, elephant.
It's not going to hurt you. I say a bison that will get excited and get through the coat.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a silly question here. What does the word olive mean? Ox? I wonder what an elephant means. Okay. That's really bad linguistics. Don't do that. But the reason I brought that up is because did you know that the African elephant and the Indian elephant are not even the same species?
Yes.
They cannot breed. They have two different types of chromosomes, two different numbers of chromosomes. And so they have actually only gotten one offspring from the mixture, which was very, it was kind of like, it was the equivalent of having a Down's child because the chromosomes were messed up. But anyway, the Indian elephant is the bulldozer of the Orient. It does all the work. It's tame. It will live with a family that it grows up with. They live about the whole length of it. Children are raised with their elephant, and then their elephant does all the work for them that needs to be done. The African elephant is a very vicious beast, and it will trample you. If you have a problem with an African elephant, it will win. Now, the African elephant does run in herds, but it's a wild beast. The Indian elephant doesn't run in herds. It's actually totally domesticated. And it is a helpful animal. The Indian elephant has very small ears. The African elephant has huge ears. The African elephant weighs almost 33, how do you say this? Okay, if you took the Indian elephant and you cut its weight in half and added it again, I'm just not thinking of the right way of conveying that message. But anyway, it is half again the size of the Indian elephant. The African elephant is much, much bigger. And then there's a hump that's different. That one of them has the hump and one of them doesn't. Okay. Now, Daniel, you had a question, so I'm going to start.
And this, are you sure that the African elephant can't be trained? Because I rode one as a child.
You probably rode an Indian elephant. You probably did. They look so similar, and the Indian elephant is big.
No, but this had a hump.
Okay, well, you were a blessed child if you lived through this. I'll just put it that way.
I sure rode.
So anyway, that's the variation between the two. Now, that means that this elephant can be thrown in either the behemoth or the trash. So we're kind of, again, at that stage. But seen as though I kind of believe that the elephants that would have been around biblical areas where it was being written about were more of the African elephants than the Oriental elephants. Now, we have to admit that elephants were used as siege animals. Okay, and that would have been the Indian elephant. Huh? Could be, yeah. So there were elephants that were used as that would be probably put more in the behemoth category. Yeah. So a horse. Okay, behemoth. You're putting it in the behemoth category, and yeah, it belongs over there. Lion. All right, now finally we've gotten to the trash, because a lion belongs in the trash. All right, so let's look at it. We only had the cow, the ox, and the buffalo in the cattle bucket. In the behemoth bucket, we had a huge number of animals, and we could have gone on for a while. We can find all kinds of animals that go in the behemoth bucket. Okay, you see, when you've been hearing about the behemoth and it said cattle, you didn't have the right picture in your mind, did you? Okay, now, what happens if there's a lot of other words like this? That's where we're having our problems, and that's where translators have their problems. And that's what they're trying to wrestle with all the time. You see, I only put the elephant in the center. I mean, the elephant and the lion in the center, in the trash. So we have a struggle. It is not easy to be a translator. Now, I get to throw in a third dimension here. The third dimension makes this even more difficult. Still have time to do this, good. Okay, we're not only going to have just the linear thing, whether it does or does not belong in the bucket, or the two languages. You see, in the Bible, we have something that's very unique. Let's think about it. We have the definition that's used. We have multiple languages, not just two. We have Greek, Hebrew. You want to throw in Aramaic, we can, because we have Aramaic in there. And then we have English, which is what we're reading. Or we may be reading some other language, but it doesn't matter. It has to be thrown in there with the Greek, the Hebrew, and the Aramaic. Okay, and then we have overlapping meaning. Now, overlapping meaning means that sometimes you have two words in the other language. You have one word, let's say in Hebrew, two words in Greek that are used for the same general concepts, but the problem is the Greek words don't mean exactly the same thing as the Hebrew word. So I picked out a word to play with here to consider this, and it's the word breed.
What is it?
Breed. Now, breed in our language is generally translated to covenant. But in Greek, they have two terms that are translated to covenant. One of them is diatheke, And the other one is syntithmehi. Now, diatheke is actually what we use when we talk about a will. Okay, that is, if I'm writing up my will in Greek, that would be diatheke. However, if I was writing up a contract to have my roof replaced on my house, that would generally be syntithmehi. So, let's look and see what we would choose as being the word that you would use to replace greet. Would we use diatheke or syntithmehi? So first of all, let's kind of look at the simple form. We're going to look at the lexicons, or maybe the Strong's Concordance probably be just as good at the moment. Okay, in the Strong's Concordance, by the way, do not get confused by the Strong's Concordance where you all say the words breach and they say, what in the world are these guys doing with Berieth there, or something like that. You know, they have, what it is that there's several schools of thought as to what was the original pronunciation. The Strong's uses the Princeton school, so I will consistently use that spelling in this document, and I pronounce it breed all the time, but they are going to say Berieth. And in fact, that's how they have it transliterated. Okay, it says from 1262, which is another Strong's word that they have in there in Hebrew, it says in the sense of cutting, like 1254. So there are two words in Hebrew that they're using as a source to give you an understanding. Now, notice it says in the sense of cutting. Okay, it is a compact because it is made by passing between two pieces of flesh. A confederacy. Now, a confederacy, boy, that's hard to get across in English terms, because when people hear confederacy, they often say, well, that's the rebels. That's one term that's a term. Depends on where I am. And on the other side, they may say, well, those are the good guys. And the reason that the word confederacy is used is that it is basically a group of nations coming together for a single purpose. And so the reason it was called the Confederate States is that they were saying each state is individual, but they're joining together in a common purpose, whereas the North was saying, no, we are a union that is all under one central power. So that was the debate, and that's why it was called the Confederate States of America. So anyway, you will notice breed, there is states covenant. So we have that is one possibility. Then we look, or we have that as the Hebrew word. Now let's look at the Greek word. This is diatheke, and it's from 1303, which means a disposition, specifically a contract, especially a divisory will. So it is translated as covenant and testament. All right. Syntithmehi. Syntithmehi means to place jointly, i.e. to consent, to bargain, to stipulate, concur, agree, assent, covenant. So, let's look at the concepts that are put here, and let's say which words they seem to agree with or disagree with. First of all, we talk about the cutting of flesh. The cutting of flesh. Is breed connected with the cutting of flesh? Okay, it is. So that's correct. We'll put a little X there. What about diatheke? Is there anything in diatheke that was dealing with the cutting of flesh? There wasn't anything in our definitions, was there? Okay, what about syntithmehi? Was there anything that talked about the cutting of flesh? Yeah, see, in both of those, there wasn't anything about the cutting of flesh. So really, neither one of those words convey the idea of cutting in flesh. Now we know what it means, loses something in the translation. Okay, what about an agreement between two parties? Is Brit an agreement between two parties? Yeah, everybody says yeah. Well, you know what? It really isn't. If you think about it, the idea of agreement means that we're coming together and we're making a decision based on both of us being equal. Now, did God go and ask Abraham, did he say, by the way, are you willing for me to do this? I didn't find anything where he was talking about being willing. He kind of came in there and says, I'm going to show you a place to go. And then he gave him a whole bunch of things in the covenant. And he didn't say, by the way, would you like to be the father of many nations? He said, I will make you the father of many nations. Now, the good thing is that this was good news to him. He was excited about it. And so he wasn't opposed to it, but it wasn't something that he was consulted about. So for the most part, a brit is not an agreement between two parties. What about diatheke? Diatheke. Consider the will, because that's basically what we're talking about. Is diatheke an agreement between two parties? Okay. It's a will. When was the last time you heard of somebody calling up the person and say, by the way, I'm going to give you $1 million. Is that okay with you? Now, it's okay with them, but it's rarely asked. It is commonly asked if they are willing to be the executor. But that's not even asked all the time. Sometimes that's just announced. So it doesn't necessarily have to have agreement. Most people don't find out whether they're in a will or not until the will is open. Okay, so there isn't an agreement made if they don't know that they're in it. So we're going to put no, that there isn't an agreement between two parties. Now, what about suntithamehi? Suntithamehi. You say yes immediately. Why do you say that? Okay. So your assumption is I'm going for something here, huh? That was the definition. So suntithamehi, yes, that is an agreement between two parties. Okay, next one. A superior dictating to an inferior. You say that it is with the brit?
I think so.
Okay, superior dictating to an inferior.
That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened.
Okay. Now, I'll tell you, we're going to get into trouble with this a little bit because most people consider marriage a covenant. And then that just doesn't mix with our thinking at all here in America. But it truly is. Yeah, if you look at it, the concept of this is a position. In fact, tomorrow I hope to talk about that a little bit in a series on atonement, and I'll leave that till tomorrow. But too often in America, when we think of a superior and an inferior, we are thinking of value. That is not the case at all. Okay, that is not biblical. There was never any indication that God valued a male over a female or anything like that. And so I'm dramatically opposed to us imposing that on the text, which I can see has come out of historical teaching. Okay, so I'm not trying to impose any type of value instrument here. But definitely in that time of thinking, there was well, I can't go into it too much without talking about tomorrow's lesson. We're going to take some of the things that we learned today and apply it in tomorrow's lesson. It'll be gradual that way. So we'll just say at the moment that a superior dictating to an inferior is pretty much a part of a covenant. All right. Now, a superior dictating to an inferior in a diatheke, is that the case? Is there a superior dictating to an inferior? Okay, that's why we need to think about this. It's because that is the meaning of superior and inferior. There is one who is saying, this is what you will receive, and this is the one who will receive it. Okay? It is a superior. It doesn't mean that the person giving the will was better than or anything. It means that they had the charge of doing so in that situation. Okay, if you, in the society that we're talking about, most assuredly, today we elders don't get much respect on that. And so in our society, it's overlooked. But you're correct that there is the idea of the superior and the inferior. But even a young person could have a will, and in the will have written that it goes to his parents. Is the young person then superior in age or superior in status? No, the young person is superior in ownership. So in that case, he was giving his belongings. He owned them. Okay, so in diatheke, it is a superior dictating to an inferior. Now, what about suntithamehi?
Because that's an agreement between two people.
Right. You definitely had equal parties in suntithamehi. Okay? So, we'll put it over there. Now, incidentally, to go back to the marriage issue, I am not absolutely sure that that really belongs under the idea of a covenant, but we can talk about that later. There are other issues that are involved there that you may go into a covenant with the person, but the marriage itself may not be a covenant, depending on how it's laid out. Okay, let's go to a will or a testament. Is a brit a will or a testament? You think yes? Okay. Okay. Well, again, we got to look at culture. There was no such thing in Hebrew as a will or a testament, because the firstborn son was the one who inherited the double portion, and then from then on out, it was divvied out equally. It was a cultural thing. They didn't even have a concept of a will. However, if you will notice, Israel broke that. He didn't follow cultural norms because of certain things that his son had done, his sons. He got down to number 4 child before he gave the what you would say the kingly blessing. Okay, so while there was a standard procedure, it could be walked outside of, but they didn't write up a will or a testament to do that. That wasn't even considered. So actually with a brit, there's no such thing as a will or a testament. Okay, diatheke. Is that a will or a testament? Yeah. Yeah, that is by definition a will or a testament. That's actually what a diatheke is. So we'll put it there. Suntithamehi. No, that is the distinction between suntithamehi and diatheke. So no, suntithamehi is not a will or a testament. How about a binding profession of action? Is a brit a binding profession of action? How about diatheke? Is that a binding profession? All right. Okay. What about suntithamehi? Is it binding? All right, yeah. They're all binding. These are all legal aspects of how we're going to work together between, various people. Okay, what about a breach? Is it a promise? Didn't God said, I will make you the father of many nations? Yeah, it's a promise. What about a diatheke? Is it a promise? It's a promise even if it isn't verbalized. Even if you find out later, it's still a promise. This goes to you. Okay, suntithamehi. Is there a promise involved there? It's a contract. It's an agreement. It's a promise. Okay, a confederacy. Is breach a confederacy? Okay, it's pretty much universal. It would help if I left up the definitions because actually that is one of the things in breach. But the funny thing is again, we often think of the idea of a confederacy as being equal parties.
Well, I'm thinking of the word British. And I thought we could take apart the British covenant man. And they brought some people within Great Britain together and made a nation and called it Britain.
Okay, that would work if that's what they did.
Okay.
So we don't know if we had a historical document that says we're going to take two Hebrew terms and we're going to tie them together to make a covenant man, the British. Okay, that would make sense. But we don't have the document. So to do that, what we're doing is we're taking the sounds like, because British does sound like Brit and Ish put together. We're taking that and we're saying, okay, this must be it. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're wrong. We'll just have to say we have no evidence. So anyway, that's a good side note, good side thing. We have to be very careful because what you have to do when you put linguistic etymology together, you have to have a chain that you can see, a chain of events. Yeah, it's the paper trail thing. There may be some things that are connected that we have no paper trail for. And there may be paper trail for things that don't exist. If the paper trail has large gaps in it, there's a good possibility that they don't actually exist. With British, nobody's ever been able to show me a paper trail whatsoever. So it doesn't mean that it couldn't be true. It just means that we don't have the proof of it. And so I wouldn't go out on any limb on the British idea. But anyway, a confederacy is nations saying that we are working together. Now, if the nations are always equal, then that wouldn't seem to be a breach. When was the last time you found an equal nation? What generally happens is that one has something the other one cannot provide. Let me give you an example. We actually have a confederacy between us and Japan. We told Japan that they could no longer build any armies, but that we would protect them. Yeah, if they were attacked, we would protect them. Okay, so that is a confederacy. We have a confederacy with many other nations under the same general term, where we've gone in. But it is usually with a superior and an inferior also. So that's why I believe a confederacy and breach still work well and don't mess up our definitions. However, diatheke, is there a confederacy in diatheke? Well, no, it's just not there. How about suntithamehi? Okay, in this case, it's the word that would be used for a confederacy in Greek. However, it's not a part of the definition. So it's one of those where you kind of go, maybe not. So in this case, I'm going to leave it out because there wasn't a whole lot of the Greeks making treaties with other countries. They were taking them over. And so I don't know that, there was probably some of that. I'd have to think back for a little bit. I haven't thought about it that much, but it would definitely be the term that might be used for a confederacy, especially over diatheke. Okay, bound in blood, and I just gave you the answer, so you better be able to get this one. You already know it. It's the problem when you push the button too quick. Bound in blood. You all know a breed's bound in blood anyway. Okay, how about a diatheke? Is it bound in blood? Okay, he's saying it had to die. Good point. But was it something that they actually bound in blood? Okay, no, really the diatheke, blood was not a part of it. What about Suntithamehi? Was blood a part of that? Okay, so see, we really don't have that bound in blood concept coming into the Greek. We lose it. Again, losing something in the translation. Okay, Breed. Does death put it into effect? Okay. Okay, now, don't you have to have a sacrificial animal in order to have a breed? Okay, see, what you would do is you go out and kill a lamb or a goat or a cattle or something like that. Remember the covenant that God made with Abraham? They went out, they split the animals. It was several animals in two. And then who walked between the pieces? God walked between the pieces. Okay, forgive me. Yah walked between the pieces. And what ended up happening by this is that he put it into effect. And if you'll remember, at that time, Abraham had to do nothing. Right, he went to sleep. He was wondering what on earth's going on. Okay, so anyway, a breed is put into effect by death. It is the covenant victim that dies. Now, what about diatheke? Does death put it into effect? Absolutely. That's when it starts, is when the person who wrote it dies. But there is a difference. You see, the testator has to die in a diatheke, whereas in the covenant, victim has to die in a breed. Both are death putting it into effect. The subject is different. Suntithamehi, does death put it into effect? No, I mean, these are live people making contracts to do things. So, no, death is not put in effect. What about canceled at death? Is a breed canceled at death? Right. You know, when Yah made Abraham the covenant, it was to his children, to his children's children. By the way, we didn't expect Yah to die. We expected Abraham to die, but it passed on down to Isaac and then to Jacob. And it even went all the way down. I mean, ultimately, David received some of this. And all Israel received some of it. So anyway, no, a breach is not canceled at death. And that, again, may give you an indication why I might think a covenant should, a marriage and a covenant may not exactly apply. Okay, it's some of the, if a marriage is a covenant, it is a very unusual type of covenant. Okay. Now, diatheke, is it canceled at death? No, it's put into effect at death. So, you know, that doesn't work at all. Okay, suntithamehi, is it canceled at death? Yeah, when somebody dies, you can't have them roof your house anymore. I mean, no matter how hard you want them to, they just can't do it. So it's canceled at death. All right, when you look at this now, which word would you use to translate greet? You see, it's not just which has the most X's and which has the most circles. It also includes what times that it doesn't work for the other. It also includes the idea of which are the most important concepts that you wish to convey. What we've done is we've looked at the word buckets here in two different languages, and now we have to make a choice. And the choice isn't nearly as easy as we thought. Oh, yes.
Let me just read the Amplified version. Get all three.
Yeah. Okay, what we usually do after this, and you're not going to be able to go along with this, but we actually take the passage in Hebrews. We start out in Hebrews 8, and we go through Hebrews 9. And we deal with the words that they use to translate. And the reason we do this is because while Hebrews, we only have a Greek copy, it would be kind of silly that they wrote the book of Hebrews to the Hebrews in a language they didn't speak. That seems kind of unusual to me. That would be me writing a book to English people in German. Say, hey, I have a letter here. I'd like to speak to all of you. And I want clarity of thought because we're going to discuss very intense and unusual ideas. And so I'm going to write it in German. And even though I know that you all don't speak German, I think it's very important that you get this letter in German. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And we do have evidence that the book of Hebrews was written in Hebrew. Furthermore, the funny thing is that you will find out in English, the book of Hebrews is not generally consistently translated into English by the translators. They don't consistently translate the Greek word into English. Same Greek word will be translated as covenant in one place and will or testament in another place. Okay, when you translate it with the word testament, it carries new connotation in the English mind and in the Greek mind. But in the Greek mind, it was the only option they had. In the English mind, it just adds to it. I can actually show you a verse in Hebrews that is totally impossible. I could take that one verse and claim the book of Hebrews did not belong in the Bible because it is obviously not correct. Okay, but let me tell you a secret. When you roll that book back into Hebrew, it all disappears. So the problem is an idea that was inserted because of the word buckets in a new language. Well, I'm going to stop with that. And tomorrow we have a session that we're going to take the word atonement and we're going to look at it from a Hebraic perspective, and we're going to look at it from those word bucket ideas, what's associated and what isn't associated. And so we're going to look at it from the Hebrew perspective and see if in English the word atonement rightly conveys the message. And hopefully it will give us a new idea, not a new idea as in something completely different, but a revelation as to what's trying to be conveyed. And I think it'll even help you understand my hesitancy on using covenant where I used covenant. Because when you start seeing the relationship and things that are going on, you'll see a covenant, but it's going to be a little bit different than you expected. So I hope you'll be able to come back tomorrow and that we'll be able to go over this, applying what we learned today in a new context. Thank you all very much. What's that? Right. Yeah, I have a book called okay, get this. It's Hebrews Controversy. Okay? And that booklet explains exactly where this goes in my Biblical Research Techniques course, because it goes through the process of showing how it is used in the book of Hebrews, how the word covenant is used, what words it replaces in Greek, and why it gains certain things in verses, and how the things that it gains, it's not really proper, because when the original meaning of the text, what you're talking about, what Paul was talking about, was a Hebrew concept that was from the Hebrew Bible. And then we translate that into Greek, and suddenly it gets a new meaning. Yes, you're correct. The Septuagint is what made the decision on what word was going to be used. But we have to realize that the Septuagint, now we have to redefine the Greek word according to the Hebrew word that was used. We have to use the Hebrew word buckets, not the Greek word buckets. And when we use the Hebrew word buckets, something different happens. So if you want to study that a little bit more, I'll recommend the book Hebrews Controversy, which I wrote. It's $3, and you can order it online off my website. That's drybonesrestorationcompany.com. Everything's spelled out, run together, no spaces. And drybonesrestorationcompany.com, and then just go to Marketplace, and at Marketplace you go down to Frank's writings, and there's several little books and booklets there available. And I think that will help you kind of get the idea that's going on here, and why it's important that we study it in the way that we do, and why it also helps with people who want to then throw something out of the Bible because no longer does it fit. You suddenly realize, oh, the problem was linguistic, it wasn't with the text.
In that you also explain why something about that. I understand that we don't have
Okay. All right, thanks again. Any other questions?
Is that it then?
That's it for the night.
Thank you, Frank. We'll take our home and study for about 10 years.